presentation today, it's a Zoomer's world, and we're just living on it. So Gen Z isn't waiting for the future. They're creating it with social media. As Gen Z leads the charge into 2025, their values, behaviors, and creativity will continue to redefine industries. Brands that truly connect with this generation will need to embrace innovation, authenticity, and a willingness to adapt to a rapidly evolving cultural landscape. This isn't just about following the trends, it's about becoming part of them. By aligning with the priorities that mattered most to Gen Z, brands can create meaningful connections and have impact. The values, preferences, and innovations of Gen Z are really what's going to define the future, not just of 2025, but the years to come. So in our last presentation, when we did the overview of what the mega trends are, we spoke in much more detail about Gen Z and product trends. You can download that as well on our website. We'll also link out to it. But kind of the idea is there's like nothing crazy and new happening. It's just this idea that like everything's extra. Marketing has to be extra. Communication has to be extra. Like transparency has to be extra. You can't just be sustainable. You have to be like extra sustainable. So just really making sure that things are like meaningful. I think it's also a time where you see a lot of like creative freedom, and which I think Daphne is going to talk about a lot more, where you're actually like finally for the first time can move away from like these tight constraints, and as a brand and even as a personal brand can think about like actually just trying new things. And who we have to thank for that really is Gen Z. They're really like unapologetically themselves, authentically themselves, and the impact is huge. It's having ripple effects. So it's like more than just a consumer segment. They're like actually becoming these like cultural architects, because culture's completely changed with technology and social media. And so what we really see is whatever their values and digital habits are, everyone else is adopting. And just the reason we focus so much on Gen Z is mainly like the size of the cohort, the way that they like control social media, and actually their like global collective spending power, just to call that out for everyone here in business chasing those dollars, $360 billion in spending power just in the US, and globally meant to hit by 2031, $2 trillion. Part of this money as well is also because it's the first time that we're seeing this big inheritance of wealth from their boomer grandparents and family members. So, and it's an interesting, people think that they know what's happening with Gen Z, but whenever you get into the details, they're like very specific. So they're these digital natives. They're like frequently on like up to 5 devices at a time, spending approximately 6 hours a day on digital devices. But the interesting thing is they're still really looking for like in real life interactions, in real life spending. They like to have actual activities, experiences. So keeping that in mind whenever you're planning how to connect with them. So, you know, in these presentations, we're definitely talking about macro trends, but we would say part of the macro trends is understanding who your consumer is. So we're saying it's important in 2025 and go forward, you really need to have a micro consumer centricism. So whenever you figure out who your customer is in Gen Z, you make sure you speak to them directly, because they're like very quick to call brands out, like that's not us, you're being unauthentic. So I think that you can have your core focus group and how you communicate with them, and then create a halo effect around that. And what we've seen here, we've been talking a lot about this in our presentations and in our work. What we really see is people are focusing on Gen Z, but what exists today is more of like a generational continuum. So although you can see subtleties between groups, basically Gen Z is creating this like halo that's like and capturing everyone. So you can definitely see that Gen X acts a little bit different, has a different like spending habits, but really if you focus, you can see kind of the biggest change that we see happening is actually as the consumer is aging, no one wants to get older anymore. There's this like chasing youth, forever young. And so where we used to have a consumer who actually aged, what we see now is a consumer leaning incredibly deeply into how not to age, how to stay young, how to stay relevant, how to stay fit, how to like across all categories. So keeping that in mind. And then what we see on the other end of the spectrum are these kids, this generation alpha actually growing up much faster. That's important to keep in mind. And we talk about this a lot, which we call the boomerang effect, which apparently technically is something else. So the technical name for this is bidirectional influencing, which basically you can just imagine what we talked about, Gen Z, like just kind of making this like effect that rolls out and encircles everyone. And I think a really good example, if you see the examples on the right of the screen, you see a handful of the famous Nepo babies. But I think it's interesting. You see their moms who many times are supermodels dressing like them. They're wearing their mom's clothes. It's very this like mix. You can't tell who's who. So I think that's where this like chasing relevancy. But obviously that relevancy is happening on social media. Gen Z and social media, they like literally don't exist without each other. And I think people could make the argument that Gen Z has really created like the like modern like architecture for what social media can be used for. Daphne is going to get into more details about that. I think you'll be surprised about some of the nitty-gritty of that. So in 2025, we continue to see that consumers will dictate everything from brand, products, and values. This is still a huge shift from what we historically saw of brands actually just telling the consumer, oh, this is the life you want. This is the product you want. This is what we'll let you have. Like those days are gone. Like it's really about listening to the customer and then serving them up what they've asked for. So more so than ever, a consumer centric approach will require you have to have that to even be part of the conversation, to even be relevant. And just making sure that you're constantly updating what that looks like. And so I think, as I just hinted at, we're going to switch over to Daphne's going to talk a little bit more about what that landscape looks like and what's actually attracting the consumer. Daphne?
Hello. Hit it. Thanks, Autumn. Okay, so my early days before Serotina, I was actually in data and science. And so I'm really keen on like what the data shows. And yes, we would like our intuition to think that the youth is on social media, but you see it in the data. So they spend an average of, females spend an average of 3 hours from the age group 16 to 24, and it dwindles as individuals get over, but this is data as of October 24. And so, but if we just kind of pause and appreciate what the social media landscape, yes, looks like now, but where it's come from, I mean, the millennials and boomers will definitely appreciate what social looked like in 2015 up to 2020. It was all about the curation. It was all about the curation. It was all about the filters, but it was really happening at a pace that was not only sustainable, but you could actually keep up with, not only as a user on the platform, but also as a brand. And then TikTok hit the mix, and then AI is taking it to a whole other level, and it's becoming harder and harder to literally keep up. Trends are happening faster, and they're lasting for shorter periods of time. And so, and the user base is fatigued on this. Users, brand managers, marketing managers, it's exhausting. And it literally feels like a workout. And actually the user base led by Gen Z is actually communicating that doom scrolling, how social media just feels like it's getting the better of them. But instead of just taking it like other generations have in the past, the Gen Z generation is speaking out about it and saying, no more, I want change. And that's what we're seeing through the content. And so, at least from my position as a social media strategist and business owner, brands and businesses come to us and they're asking the exact same questions they did a decade ago. How do I stand out in a crowded space? What platform should I be on? What's the best use of my media spend? What content engage? It's literally the same questions, and it's independent of the size of the brand. Corporate, national brands, global brands, resources may change, but the questions are still the same. And so despite popular belief, the data shows, and if you talk to people one-on-one, like qualitative and quantitative data actually show that the number one reason why people are on social is to keep in touch with family and friends. Other content on the platform may cause them to stick to that, but essentially the call to action when surveyed is they want to keep in touch with family and friends. Yes, there's all these other content sources that they end up also wanting to, but they're actually second tier to that family and friend connection, which is really some of the roots of social for most platforms. And so this is not unique to, some may like to think that of the boomers and even older generations, like the grandmothers on Facebook and stuff like that. But actually that's the response when surveyed on a global scale from 3 different age groups, 16 to 24, 25 to 34, and 35 to 44, 45 to 54, and all age groups say that. The second reason that they're on social changes slightly, and that makes sense as we talk, but across the board, it's ungenerational. If we, again, the same group is surveyed, excluding YouTube, when asked which is their favorite platform, when you split up by gender in this case, not sex, and age group, meta platforms actually win across the top board. TikTok isn't actually at the top, which is surprising. I have my own theory about that, because when you actually look at the data in that same cohort, the stickiness of TikTok and the time spent on TikTok is like no other. So my theory is that people partly aren't mentioning, they're like embarrassed of the addiction of TikTok, but at the same time, we appreciate that the different platforms have different purpose for different users across all these platforms. And so, yeah, dun, dun, dun. And so TikTok's fate is TBD, as many of you probably know. As of the 19th, new administration set a 75-day extension to allow the owners of TikTok, ByteDance, find new owners for TikTok in America. But what that's going to look like and what is being purchased of TikTok and remains of the US is still up for conversation. And there's even been a proposal that the US government own part of TikTok. And so what is definitely happening, regardless if TikTok is going to be here, and there's been so much conversation, not only amongst creators, but also marketeers. It's like, this is actually nothing new. Platforms I don't know if anyone remembers Vine, which was a video first, almost like if Twitter and TikTok had a baby. And so, we all survived. Nothing actually took the market after that. People just found expression on other platforms. So at the end of the day, what's really, really interesting, when TikTok was unavailable for all of 3 hours, users put that time and energy, I kind of say that addiction, into other platforms. And what's really interesting is where they're going. And it's not defaulted to Meta, which is what Meta maybe would have hoped for. And they're really trying to introduce new programs. They have their new edit tool, which competes with CapCut from TikTok and ByteDance. And then they have their new bonus program for creatives, essentially to monetize, to provide creators more cash if they create on the platform. So that's a little obvious and definitely easier for brands. But what's really interesting is so many of TikTok users actually ran to Redno, which is essentially TikTok in China, which I'm sure many of you know. And the user base in just, I believe it was 24 hours, went from 700,000 US users to 3.4 million users in a day. That's what it is. And not only that, Duolingo saw an increase in users trying to learn Mandarin by 212% year over year. And so this appetite to be on that type of platform, we'll see if that sticks. Time will really, really tell. And the other two ones that are coming up, sorry, just really quick, is Clapper. That was news to me. ChatGPT let me know that one's up in the mix. And then Blue Sky. But Blue Sky, we'll see if they can really keep up with user growth.
So I think the interesting thing that we see is no matter what the platform is, right? And I think from a brand point of view, right, Daphne, it's always about making sure you're like diversifying and you're like keeping up with like what the options are. I think it's like the old saying of like not all the eggs in one basket, because we've seen that could be like very volatile, especially when you make such a serious investment. I think seeing all of the TikTok refugees and all of the tears it was a very emotional week of a roller coaster for a lot of people. But I think when you think as well about this, so as the platforms change and evolve, I think even without the like political piece of it, right, we definitely see that there's an evolution. And I think what we've seen is, just so we know that this isn't going anywhere, and a different filter to think it through is also imagine as well through the like data and the surveying, we actually see that like Gen Z is actually using all of social media as their search engine. So the Gen Z cohort is more interested in using social media and trust more in social media to do search than they would Google. So I think that's just like, it's interesting from many, many different aspects of what you're putting on social media, and also like who this consumer is, that they believe in their peers more. Also, it makes them much more susceptible, right, to different types of like input, whether it be true or not true. So I think in all of our presentations we've given in the last 6 months, this has been like the most like mind-blowing piece for myself. It was as well. I think as like a very, very old millennial, as I hold on to my millennialness, that I think that, it would never occur to me, like I would use social media for discovery, but never as like my search engine to find facts. But that's obviously shifting. And whenever we think about things that are shifting as well, I think it's also, we see this generation, it no longer is like looking just to like pop stars and no longer looking to, like, there's definitely not this like look to like movie stars. Influencers can come, and influence can come in many different packages now. So we've just called out a handful here that are like top of mind and like just really new to this space. I think at the top, starting at the top, I feel like this Deaf Girl Listens is amazing and has a huge following. Obviously, Alex Cooper in the middle, superstar with her insane deal. We see everything from Emma Chamberlain, Alex Earl, and to Jess's personal favorite, Mudang up at the top, the baby hippo. And what's interesting is that not only is this like influencing space happening, but they're also building brands, building merch, and merch becoming the brand. And it's not just only about collaborations now. It used to be like the power of the influencer was actually like the collaborations they could do. But I think what the influencers are seeing now, and from a product standpoint, is like they are their own brand. They don't even need the collab. They can make their own products, sell their own products, and actually build their brands. We talk a lot about this like merch piece. Merch is really like how you define yourself now. Like the best example, it's not on here, but a great example we had was, you know, like we were saying, we saw everyone wearing like a US Open hat. Like if you didn't have the US Open hat, did the US Open even happen? Because it was such like a hot status symbol. So this merch also leads into this idea of like new status symbols. And I think when we look at that piece, we had a conversation with Daphne whenever we were pulling all of this research together. And there's like a lot of blurry lines of like a creator, an influencer, an affiliate. So this is obviously in the deck, and I think she's going to hit on it quickly, though there's a lot of information here.
Yeah, just to kind of level set, one person can be all these things, a creator, an influencer, and an affiliate marketer, but kind of the cheat sheet is a creator creates content independent of the sell-through of that piece of content. It's literally for the creation of a piece of content, static, dynamic, you name it. An influencer uses their influence to drive an action out of their following. It's very much about them and their platform in which they can drive an impact on. And then affiliate marketing is the old school one, where it's purely about sales through an affiliate link or promotion code. And so again, one person can do all these things for a brand or a business, or as an individual, or they can be considered separately.
I think also from like the business side as well, it's like interesting to make sure like you're like connecting what your business goals and expectations are, right? So there's some you can use, like, for example, an influencer for like a point of discovery, brand awareness, but maybe you use like the affiliate, like more like affiliate marketing for actual sales conversion. So I think making sure you have like that matrix fully vetted before you make the investment helps you from like chasing dollars. And as with all of this talk about Gen Z, we're going to see how this hits on a webinar. It was very funny in person. But so slang to Gen Z is now called internet speak, for those of you who didn't know. Gen Z is a generation that has a lot of new slang, internet speak. They communicate in dances. They communicate in memes, emojis. And we just have, we've pulled together a quick list here of some of the hottest terms. Daphne's going to read them out. And then we thought it would be like interesting to see what you thought they meant in the chat. So hit it, Daphne.
Okay, a bit of a rapid fire. So I'm going to call them out, and if you type them in the chat, if you know what they are. So pop off, 8 left no crumbs, I'm gagged, OOMF, coded, or maybe my fave, Riz King.
So we'll give you a moment to respond. I actually can't see the chat. So Jess, do you have any answers for us?
Tell us, Danielle. Sometimes I don't even know.
Justin said impressed, which I think is for I'm gagged. And Daniel knows pop off and Riz King. Mm-hmm. Danny said 8 and left no crumbs is like someone who did something really good, which yes. Gag does mean impressed, but like super impressed.
Can you tell us just the one I always forget, OOMF, that's like highly debatable?
This is, so millennials say that it's one of my followers, and Gen Z thinks it's one of my friends. So
subtleties. So yeah. I think part of what we've like suggested here, when you hear all of this like internet speak, and thank you everyone for your contribution there, is what we really recommend if you have, like, if your business can facilitate it, is really honestly empowering like a Gen Z suite. So a Z suite, as they call it. So, and Daphne's going to talk about this more whenever you're talking about like ick and authenticity, making sure you're using the right terms in the right way so that it resonates with your target customer. And then we're going to see if this works. Let's see. We have a quick little video here.
Hi, fam. I'm kind of feeling skibbity, so I've got off my get to come up to rizz up McChicken, please. IRL. Thanks. That sounds like it's just one chick. I'm thirsty, so maybe. Do you have a medium lemonade? Oh, that sounds busting. Do you have the Sunday? Oh, if you have the Sunday, I will hit the gritty. No cap. All my daughters are shook. Don't be salty. Yeah. Oof. Let's go chocolate. Weird flex. Small, but great, thanks. No, it's all good. Yeah.
Amazing. So aside from the embarrassment caused to his daughters, I think it's just like, you can see like the authenticity of when it hits and when it doesn't hit, and making sure that you understand this like new vocabulary and use it correctly, or like for comedic purposes as well. So making sure you fully embrace this like cultural dialogue. Just seeing that and see these girls in the back seat who are very cringed out by their dad. You know, this is a cohort, whenever you talk about that's like really, they have this like dichotomy of character as well. So they're also like quite deep, right? There's this like surface level playfulness of how they communicate and how they talk, but also they have like, they're very interested in different things, right? Like they want to be fashionable, but they're into sustainability. They're very interested in values, but they want products. So I think as well, like making sure that you're always doing this like litmus test of like, okay, do we understand both sides of them? And like, do we appreciate that it's like a dichotomy of like character in this cohort? And what we see as well, which is always makes all of our customers like very nervous, like old is the new. Also remembering that this is a group that they do lean into fast fashion and they do like that, but they're also very into like thrifting. They're very into doing it themselves. They're very into finding their own style. So we definitely see that this has caused some panic in our retail fashion world, because obviously people are used to selling new products, but also thinking about, is there like a resale? What's like your sustainability plan? Just to make sure that you're not providing like greenwashing, which they can see through. And whenever we talk more about this customer, right, we're talking about them being constantly online, shaping social media. But what we see as well, and Daphne hit on this earlier as well, is that we really see that they're getting like a fatigue. And so we definitely see that they're taking time to be offline as well. So even meeting them in these offline experiences is also great. The sad truth is that there's been like a lot of new like issues around mental health related to, or even like given a platform via social media. So I think making sure that you're like addressing that. We see a lot of brands leaning into that, addressing it, just so that the customer also feels heard and seen. But this is like definitely a real situation where we have this like the Gen Z needing to like disconnect from this constant like dopamine hits of like some of the more addictive and sticky platforms. Also this new era of like this trying to keep up with everyone else. We know that they're trying to move away from that and just be accepted as themselves. This, I think 2025, authenticity without the ick. Daphne, if you would.
Yeah. So, you know, authenticity reigns supreme, but authenticity isn't a new word or a new demand of the social platforms or from brands, right? And so what does this really, really look like through execution? And so what we did is we hedged our bets and put together 3 categories of what we feel based on Gen Z's headspace feelings, and they really lead the trends and trend adoption. Like they set the trends and everyone else kind of follows suit. And so we've created 3 categories of what we feel content is going to look like in 2025. And at the end of the day, it's really about the consumers and the users on the social platform, not just Gen Zs, but also millennials and boomers, craving transparency and really rejecting forced notions and disingenuous efforts. Like they won't give you a second of their time if it feels phony or fake, but yet authenticity super forced is really, really cringe. So what does this look like? So we've created 3 categories: unapologetically you, tangible impact and involvement, unwind online. And we're going to show you through some examples of those. All of these are clickable. So when you get the deck, you can click out and see these actual examples in real life. We won't play them now because it just won't land the same way. Unapologetically you, say it like it is, if not now, when. So here are 4 different sub pillars to this. So age inclusivity. Now more than ever, age doesn't really matter in being a creator. It used to be really youthful, very attractive individuals, but now, I mean, I don't know who doesn't love this grandmother. And she's sharing her dating tips. She's talking about her personal life. She's talking about her sex life. Like she's like not holding back, and people are here for it. Honest money talk. I mean, the economic climate is no secret to anyone. And so, what's happening now, it's actually in fashion to really disclose your financial situation. So people are actually showing their bank statements, showing where money goes in and out, and being really honest with money talk. It's no longer on vogue to pretend you have means or you have wealth. Owning unrelatability. So no one does this like Alex Earl. It was really kind of, influencers often downplay, or the early influencers would often downplay their access to means. And it kind of, it was their way to try and connect with their users. But now actually what we're seeing is that people who did have privilege and become an influencer, showing that and owning that as a part of connecting to their fan base, and fans are all over it. And then evolving with pride, this the LGBTQ plus community and creators really got empowered, and micro communities becoming macro communities in social landscape, specifically in 2024, and we're expecting to see more of that in 2025. And platforms like TikTok provide monetization and means for these communities to not only make money but also gain allyship. This is just it written out, so as a takeaway, if I'm not there to speak to you, it's all there. Okay, tangible impact and involvement, focusing on meaningful impact and participation instead of shallow narratives. The most understood way of this is no greenwashing, but at the same time, what's happening now is as users are continually questioned, and social media has actually empowered users to not only voice their questions, but try and figure out, as Autumn mentioned, social as a search. I encourage all of you after this, yes, ChatGPT is there for you, but actually search some questions or search for, give TikTok some keywords on your desktop or even on your phone. It's incredible how pointed the results will get. And so with that in mind, there's now this plethora of content that like deconstructs narrative. So anything that comes top down is not necessarily taken at face value. There's accounts fully dedicated to educating and empowering people to know more information. With that comes great responsibility, and people have to navigate it with caution. But it's not necessarily political. There's a lot of just pure, like whether it's finance, whether it's outer space. This one is a great example. In the game. So yes, racial and ethnic minorities were really important to see in marketing material, but that is now baseline. Like if you don't have that, what are you doing? But now what the consumers and users are expecting is people with disabilities, mental or physical, and really representing the world as Gen Z sees it in social content. And then de-influencing consumerism. Autumn was talking a lot about this, right? They want to have their Miu Miu bag, but it's, or Miu Miu shoes, and it's paired with their vintage tee that they got off Depop. And so they're really trying, there's this huge movement of like de-influencing or under consumption core, where it's all about, you might have that Louis bag that you thrifted, but make it last as long as you possibly can. Those sneakers that you bought, like you better wear them until there's like holes at the bottom. And so, and really finding, like giving that clout as opposed to the new shiny designer bag. Last but not least is my favorite, unwind online, the shift to content levity. So really social media isn't supposed to be that serious. It was actually supposed to be like really lighthearted, and it didn't, like people are fatigued with all this charge and, nuance of it all. They literally want to go there to chill. And so some of the sub pillars that we see are whimsical drama. There's so many TikTok trends that come up. This one was the, suspect trend, but there was a recent one where we listen and we don't judge. I mean, for the TikTok ban, I'm sure a lot of you saw there were creators going on and admitting secrets. Some of them were light, some of them were a bit serious, but it was all just kind of making social light. Branded quirky chaos. So literally just the definition of quirk being that on the social landscape. No one, in my opinion, does it better than Michael Kors. They actually are empowering their customers, micro influencers, pure creatives, right, independent of their social reach or following, and just doing fun, quirky stuff. And if you know Marc Jacobs or him as a brand, and then the brand itself, it's fully aligned and it totally works for them. Shit posting, this one I have a hard time with, but if anyone really remembers the age of Instagram with a super curated feed and it was all about the aesthetic and the size of the tile, this is literally the antithesis of that. It's like the far other end of it. You're like literally cut, pasting, putting on. It's often doesn't even make sense, but that's actually the point. As big brands, Duolingo and KFC actually do this exceptionally well. And then HopeCore is a little bit more straightforward, but it's literally just like the pure little joys of the world, often combined as a video that go viral and reposted on several accounts. But it's or Pottery Girl, or it's little like snippets of joy in life, augmented on social. And so Autumn talked about this before, but like cultural heat isn't for every brand. And so it's really important for brands to know what internet phenomenons are appropriate for them to get on board, because again, this not only Gen Z, millennials, and boomers too, they're empowered now to call you out and be like, no, that doesn't make sense. I mean, Charlie XCX, her fan base, especially Gen Z, really questioned the H&M collaboration because Gen Z really values sustainability, and so they felt that was a bit offbeat and brand, excuse me. And then offbeat, if anyone is in Toronto like myself, the very demure trend, right, was like hot for a week. The city of Toronto 2 months later had driving safe is very mindful all over the city and their construction, like cute, B+ for effort, but this is like it wasn't demure anymore kind of thing. And so like this is a lot to wrap your head around, especially if you're a founder-led business. And so this is our very easy way to kind of navigate this and figure out what trends are appropriate for you as a brand to adopt. So it's 3 key pillars. One is have your brand guidelines. It can be a beautiful 50-page document, or it can be a 1-page backup napkin, but just really clear on who you are and what your values are as a brand. And then a social media playbook. Really, that is who you are as a user in the social landscape. So if you're a brand on social, you're supposed to participate like a human. That's really what social, like how brands operate on social. And then third to this is really important when it goes to thinking about and considering trends, also with the music royalties in the TikTok space. But what is your PR and legal risk tolerance? So some are willing to be a bit more outlandish and spokes than others. But what is your business, whether it's your legal department or leadership, really willing to tolerate and take a risk on? And so with all that to say, especially with TikTok, ban is still TBD. What this kind of shows is that, platforms, after they've been in market for quite a bit of time, users go to certain platforms for certain things. Like TikTok is really, really big on entertainment, right? Like edutainment is kind of what it's been understood in the market to be, where Facebook is very much the place that people go to message family and friends. So as a business and a brand, we always advocate for, depending on resourcing, like pick minimum 2. You don't have to do 2 at the same volume or cadence or capacity, but just do at least 2 really, really well. And then we can figure out the rest when resourcing allows for it. So this is just kind of to give you permission to do that. And another thing to make things a little bit more cost effective, these are very accessible to implement no matter who you are, but work with creators, melt mind, win hearts, really allow creators to, or actually what should also be here is employees. Employee generated content is expected to outperform user generated content in about 3 years time. There's still this are employees really comfortable representing the brands and what that looks like? But as everyone wants to be a creator independently, employees are actually more interested in being creative for a company. It's a bit more ubiquitous. Autumn talked about viral content SOPs, so whether you have a Gen Z task force or team, but really to facilitate, some of big brands really get bogged up in like legal approval and time, but trends, you've got to be timely. So, separate that from your evergreen or campaign content, literally have a separate task force or a separate calendar or workflow that facilitates approvals literally within 24 hours from production to posting. And then my favorite, even though it's sometimes a bit harder to do because everyone gets as a producer, you can get comfortable on a desktop, but produce in app as much as you can. Stay in app, stay with the trends. You'll be more in tune with what's happening and also leveraging the tools in the platforms, TikTok, for example, Instagram, for example, that will lend itself to virality or higher visibility. Okay, and then just looking a little bit further ahead, like yes, video and audio isn't going anywhere, but more importantly, AI integrations, and the new administration is really in the US at least is really putting that front and foremost. So it is to be expected that AI is going to be even further integrated into social platforms more than it already is, and sometimes it's not as overt as it's some kind in the back end or powering their engines behind it. But one of the biggest things is that creativity is really democratized, right? And so with some of the AI integrations, for example, in Adobe is this example, you can literally dictate to it by written copy what you want it to do, and it'll spit back exactly what you're asking, and you can give it feedback. And so it's really allowed people who aren't designers, for example, to design. The question of creativity is there. And then enhanced personalization. The shop features with AI integrations are going to be not only on TikTok. Black Friday, Cyber Monday on TikTok was exceptional this past in 2024, but it's only going to get more accessible and roll out across different user groups. And then the gamification, which social's already quite gamified, but having that inherent to the platforms and actually new platforms as they go to market.
Perfect. Just for everyone, so I see a few people dropping off as I see we're approaching the hour. We're going to speed through the last slides quickly. Also, because we want to save time for a Q&A, which we're going to host for like the back end of this. Also, for anyone else who has like deep dive questions or wants to schedule a follow-up meeting, we're actually, Daphne and I are going to stay on for depending what time zone you're in, the next hour as well, to work on some of those and scheduling meetings. If that's interesting to anyone, make sure you stay on. But just kind of to wrap this up and jump on where Daphne left things off, is we definitely see this place of like playing, gamifying, having fun, being real, really being important across so many pillars of marketing, social, and also of like product. If you're interested in this, again, like our next talk will focus on these topics: gamification, gaming influences, AI, and also a huge topic for the future as well. Like, what is the fandom? What does the fandom mean? And how do you become part of the fandom? So stay tuned for that. Dates TBD. They should be in March. And just in conclusion, really 2025 gives you the power to like reshape your brands, reshape them with your customers, and create like a faster process, break down some of the walls and silos that were there previously, connect with your customer and build something together for the future. Obviously, we're both running agencies that are trying to predict the future and help find the future. So if you have a question, make sure you reach out. And thank you for joining our first Tacos and Trends webinar. Does anyone that was a lot of content. Does anyone have any questions, or I can't see the chat. Jess, maybe do you have any questions to answer? Mikhail, I see your hand up. That's the only part I can see. You want to read some questions, Jess?
Yes, let me go back up to that. Okay. Andy had a couple questions. I don't know if he wants to say them or if
you can read them.
Okay. Andy said, what is Gen Z's reaction to AI infiltrating social media in the form of AI profiles, AI posting, AI curated content? Is there backlash? Does Gen Z want AI content? As a Gen Z, I'm going to say that we don't like it.
Skeptical, right? I think this is already like the short answer, Andy, is I think this is already like a skeptical generation. They already don't want to believe Google. They don't like the news. They don't like big business. So AI creeping into their lives, I think maybe there's a realization that it's there, but it feels uncomfortable, right? So it's not, I think to Daphne's point, they'd rather maybe something more like authentic and like thoughtful uses of AI and like clear transparency of when it's being used and when it's not being used.
But they're the first to adapt with it, right? And so it's not, they're
That's
not
the irony.
Yeah, I from what we see, they're not as kind of like, oh my God, terrified about it. They're like, if they got taught him, if it's going to be here, let me know that it's here and I'll be empowered to use it, as opposed to letting it take over my life or dominate me. And also through workflows, at least at the agency, at least it's our expectation that everyone at the company use them. And often Gen Zs are the one who is most intuitive on how to use them. And the millennial ways of viewing them are a little bit more like black and white, but then we see Gen Z and their adoption to them. It's like, it's so fluid.
Thank you. Okay, what else, Jess?
If I may go into that just briefly, I will say,
Right.
like, do you know the influencer Michaela? Like, I don't know that she's AI generated, but she's not a real person. And she was like created by designers, and she would share like a normal influencer would, like she's going places, doing things, and she had millions of followers. I think she still does. This was a while ago though. And she had followers because it seemed authentic, even though you knew that she wasn't real. Whereas this like latest like meta push for profiles, a lot of them were like, the ones that I saw at least were like, oh, I'm an older widower and I'm a Black man with my own business. And it was like, that just didn't feel authentic to us, because it all felt like they were like, the other one I saw was like, I'm an older lady who's LGBTQ. Like, and it was like, you're trying to put these like diverse backgrounds on people, and it doesn't feel authentic at all. And then it also feels like you're kind of taking space from those like actual like demographics and accounts that aren't getting the exposure. And I think that's where it like hits different. Is Michaela, you knew she was a robot, but you still want to be her friend because she's cool and she's doing things that you like. Whereas like these were like, they were created by millennials. So it was like, this is just a whole person that could just exist in normal. Like, why is that interesting to me? And I think that was kind of the difference.
No, I think that's a good point. I think I just figured out how to open up the chat, and I see, Alex, I see your question. It says, are there trends the brands and companies should let go of? I think anything that doesn't feel authentic. I think anything that's greenwashing. We know that this is like a generation, and collectively, especially in like the current landscape, people want products that are sustainable, but I think even more so than products that are sustainable, they want like companies to have an ethos of sustainability that's like real and that you can transparently see into. So I think like trying to create something that has like a drop of sustainability in it, or like a drop of something in it, doesn't make sense anymore. So I think that really like leaning into things that are authentic make the most sense. And I think as well, I think maybe what some brands should move away from, and I think Daphne hit on this, is like, you can't hit every trend. So I think you have to know who you are and decide like, okay, even as these trends are moving, this is like where we're staying. I think that's why, if you missed our previous presentation, why we were like, okay, here's 4 mega trends you could ground yourself in. You can put them through your own brand filter and be like, okay, here's where we're going to play. And exactly what like Daphne was saying is, as these trends pop up, we've seen them all, like all of the micro aesthetics. Like, do we chase it? Do we not chase it? And sometimes it's worth the chase and sometimes it's not. And if you're going to be really late to it, it's not worth it.
And just to add to that, right? There's the concept, like some micro trends go macro, and then the time in which you can add to them. And then also the data will show you, at least in the social landscape, so what trends you should let go of. Like if, demure lasted pretty long, but it was actually short considering how big the trend was and like how many people were using it. And outside of the social media, it was all over emails. Every email blast had the subject line, very demure. And so the data will also let you know when it's kind of run its course, and or the comment sections, at least in Showthrow, will tell you when it's time to let it go. And you can always delete that content, right? If it's like, oh God, now it's cringy.
Amazing. So I see as well, just to loop back with your question, Andy, about AI, I see Alex, who is a pure Gen Zer. He had a similar thought as a comment as Jess, like, if you can see right through it and it seems fake and not authentic, like pass, which is like pretty much the answer to everything at this point. Like if it's not real, if it's like not real to your brand, doesn't feel authentic, keep it moving. Anyone else have any? I don't see any other questions. Any other questions?
He did ask, and Andy asked
I
another question.
just put another one in there. Just,
Andy, blow into the questions. What % of brand marketing dollars go to social media versus SEO, other digital traditional marketing? I mean, Andy, that's a deep question. I think you have to hire us to answer that. I can
Okay.
give that out for free. Yeah, I think
All right.
I think really honestly, it depends on like what your brand is, what the goals are, and like what the product is, right? It's obviously the difference. It has a different answer for like a digital product and like a skincare brand.
No, but for like the big brands, like whatever, like the big retail brands and stuff, are they spending like 10% of their dollars on social media or 50%? Like what's the
Yeah, I can just jump in there. It's also shifting quite quickly. Like there's recent information coming out about ad spend dropping on TikTok in light of its unpredictability. I mean, X was very clear where media dollars were pulled, and then Google is just like such a big player. But then there's also out of home and display and billboard, and so each brand, depending whether it's like evergreen or campaign, and like depending on the call to action, it's like very, very, very unique. And then so and oftentimes this is answered where we're the point of purchase, right? So if it's a retail brand, the transactions aren't happening online. So their media spend for conversion is very, very different. It's all about awareness, which is a totally different pay for visibility model. And then so if you're doing purely bottom funnel, I mean, Meta's gotten extremely expensive recently. TikTok's kind of competed for that. So it's really brand dependent. They say 20% of conversion, but that's very focused on e-com.
Yep.
Anyone else? Well, perfect. I think then if there's anyone who's interested in having a furthering the chat, please stay in and we'll be happy to answer more questions in more details or talk about specifics of your business. Make sure you have our contact, reach out if you need something, follow us on socials. And if you have any problems downloading the report, harass Jess and she'll make sure you get it. And thank you all. And thanks to everyone for being so flexible and showing up digitally today. Thank you.